Welcome to an episode of Theological Sidebars. So here we are. This video today is one that I've been wanting to make and for some time. But here's the deal. Wednesday nights we've been doing a class called Questions, and it's really about answering questions, any kind of questions that people have. But one of the questions that we had come up was about the spiritual realm. And so I wanted to look into this a little bit. I wanted to talk about that because there's a lot of difference of opinions, and this is one that we really don't talk about often. So I want to look at the spiritual realm. What does the Bible say about angels? What does the Bible say about demons? Were there giants in the Old Testament, and are they related somehow? And so typically, your average church doesn't really wade into this because some of it's weird, and some of the videos that are out there that are made by people who, like me, are making these videos are often very weird. I guess you're right. And you don't know what to make of it, and how should we view it. So let's take this and let's just go a deep dive of just what does the Bible say about the spiritual realm around us. So just to keep in mind, one of the things that's important to remind ourselves of as we go through this material is, and this is from, he's over at Dean of Biblical Study, or the Christian Studies Department over at California Baptist University, Chris Morgan. I like what he says in his theology book. He says, Scripture does not present a complete angelology, Satanology, or demonology, but it teaches some truths on these topics. And so we've got to keep in mind that as we try to unfold this all, people are coming from different places on it, because we don't have a Bible that says, chapter 1 or chapter 2 about angels or what. We're taking bits and pieces, and trying to fit the full picture together. So even my Wednesday evening class, we had some disagreement over how the pieces fit together. And so I want to say that we might end up in different places, but that's fine. I'm going to tell you kind of how I think the pieces come together. So let's look at the passage that kind of we can kick this off with. This is, of course, in Ephesians 6:10. Finally, be strengthened by the Lord and by His vast strength. Put on the full armor of God so you can stand against the schemes of the devil. So remember, he's starting by saying, we're going to stand against the schemes of the devil. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this darkness, against evil and the spiritual forces in the heavens. For this reason, take up the full armor of God so that you may be able to stand, you may be able to resist in the evil day, having prepared everything to take your stand. So, this is the part where we know there's a battle that's coming from the devil. We also know that there is a spiritual thing that's going on. He says you're not going against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, cosmic powers of darkness, evil, spiritual forces in the heavens, right? So this is not just internal struggles that keep me from God, but he's saying that there is a spiritual realm outside of us, and it's real. And there's stuff that we need to be made aware of. So how about this one? We'll go over to Colossians 1, verse 16. And Paul says this about Christ. For everything was created by him in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. So in here, you have things that are both invisible and visible. Thrones or dominions, rulers or authorities, right? So these are things that some have speculated too. Is it that we have heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, that we're contrasting that there are things that are both visible and invisible, that there are things that may bring us to a place to recognize that there is a spiritual realm outside of what you and I can currently see. We have governments ruling in the physical realm, but that behind the scenes there is also a spiritual realm that has some real darkness to it. Well, seems to be. And did the Bible originally set things up? Was it originally set up to where there was some sort of ruling, rulers or powers that are in the spiritual realm. This is the first time I ever thought about this. I was reading Michael Heiser, his book Unseen Realm, and he was the first one. And I'm not a full Michael Heiser person. I think we should be able to read everything and to kind of take what we think he's strong in and keep that. And you don't have to buy everything when you read something like that. But I think he makes a good point in that, in the same way that God had created humans to have dominion over the physical, right? That there is some sort of a hierarchy, and you see that in these verses here. So let's look a little bit further into some of this darkness. So we've talked on a Wednesday about things like angels and demons, but I do want to look a little bit more about maybe the darkness that we see in the Bible as it's called out. So you'll see things like, let's start with this one, right? You'll see in Exodus 20 verse 3, God tells the people of Israel at Mount Sinai, do not have any other gods besides me. And I've always thought about this question. I don't know if you have, of like, what's behind that? Like, why does he have to say, don't have any other gods beside me? Because he's had the people in the wilderness with him. They're in Sinai now. This one has not gone into the wilderness yet, but they've gone through Egypt, gone through the Red Sea, and parted over. They've wandered in the Sinai and been fed. God, they've seen miraculous things, and he's telling them, don't have any other gods beside me. Why is that always a real temptation? That's something I've always wondered. Of what is the temptation for these people? My contention is that there's actually something behind that. Not that these are real gods. We're not polytheists as believers, but I do think that there's some evidence from the Bible to show that that these fallen angels, I'm just going to play my hand now, are the ones behind this, and that God's saying, you don't worship these things. Don't worship them at all. Which would actually fit with the rest of the Bible too, right? When even to Christians, he cautions, don't worship the good angels. Because people get all, if we've entertained angels, if we know that the angels are helping us, there's something that's in the Christian that would make them wonder, should I, can I? And Hebrews makes it very clear too. We don't worship, and every time you see a good angel, it's don't worship me. But I digress. Notice that when we read in the Bible, what do we find about the title of Satan? Notice in Ephesians 2, he is called, right? He is the ruler of the power of the air, the spirit now working in the disobedient. So it's telling us that Satan he's the ruler over it seems to be, right? He is the one who's behind so much of what's going on in the world around us. He really sets the tone for what's happening. He influences the spiritual realm for bad. He is behind so much of that. It is really interesting, too. You'll see things like in Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought, but he could not prevail. There was no place for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent who's called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was thrown to earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a voice in heaven say, salvation and power and the kingdom of our God, the authority of his Christ, have now come, because the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuse them before our God day and night has been thrown down. They conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives to the point of death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you with great fury, because he knows his time is short. And so we can talk about another time when that is and when that all takes place. But notice this, right? So that he has the devil, right, the dragon has his own angels who will fight. He's got his own angel army that fights against the army of Michael, which, by the way, I think that's an interesting insight. Is Michael is an archangel. We can talk more about that. There's seems to be a hierarchy in the spiritual realm, but the devil is seems to be at that level with him of a Michael, that in that terms of power and fight, but he's never ever equated anywhere close to God's power. Now, let's look a little bit further about the kind of influence that he has. So remember, he's the prince of the power of the air. He has an angel army. Notice in the temptation of Jesus, it says the devil took him to the high mountain, showed him all the kings of the world and their splendor, and he said to them, I will give you all these things if you fall down and worship me. Now, that temptation, how is that a real temptation unless it's real, right? Notice Jesus doesn't say to him, you really don't have that power. You can't give me that. No, he says you will worship the Lord your God alone, right? That's it. And so his response is not that he debates whether Satan can even do that, but he shuts that down very quickly. And he says, I only worship the Father. So notice, though, that it seems to be that Satan has control over the world. Now, I think that's something to be said, too, of when you think about Revelation and you think about the influence and the power that Satan has. Notice in here, I'll just show you over at this one. This is in Revelation chapter 13. It says, the whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. They worshiped the dragon because he gave authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against it? Right? That's interesting that they all go because the dragon, Satan, gives this authority to the beast. And it seems to be that he is the one who kind of crafts the culture. And because he gives his authority to ultimately the beast, the people follow along and begin to worship. So this is the picture that we get of the influence that Satan has in the realm around us. So the next question I want to have is, okay, so what does that look like? What does that mean? How does he have influence over all these nations? Why? How did he get it? So let's talk about that. So in the most basic answer you could give is, all of that was turned over when Adam and Eve have chosen to sin, right? So that when they chose to sin, sin enters the world, and therefore Satan has influence over it. Yes, in that. I mean, there are some who, that's a whole concept, even in terms of what will be called like the ransom theory of the atonement, the idea that Jesus came to ransom. It's an interesting concept. I don't think you have to be a ransom theory person to hold this at all, that Satan has influence of the world because of sin. But I think there's more to this than just simply that he has influence over the world because of sin let in. I think that definitely plays a part. I think that the sin that ultimately leads to greater areas of influence that will come out. So some things that we begin to see in terms of the spiritual realm around us. Let's just start with something that we notice, and it comes up in Job chapter 1, it does appear to be, right? It says the sons of God, these are the angels, chapter 1, verse 6, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. So he has an audience with the other angels. Now, so this is obviously, it seems to be, before he's been kicked out, no longer allowed there. The Lord came and said, where have you come from? From roaming through the earth and walking around on it. And have you considered my servant Job? There's no one else like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him and his household? By the way, his name in and of itself, Satan, he's the adversary. Like you'll see how that word is used. He is the adversary. He is the one his goal is to come against, right? And to make accusation, all of that. And so he's coming against the people of God. So he has this, it seems to be that there's this place where the angels present themselves. What are they doing? Well, Satan is roaming and he's going around the earth. But why? And what is this that they're presenting themselves for? Well, I think there's a really interesting psalm to think through. And I know that if you read like Michael Heiser's book, this is one that sent him on this journey. When I first read this, I was not there. But I think the more that I've studied, I've come to this same place. So this is a Psalm of Asaph, Psalm 82. And it says, God stands in the divine assembly. He pronounces judgment among the gods. How long will you judge unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Provide justice for the needy and the fatherless. Uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute. Rescue the poor and the needy. Save them from the power of the wicked. They do not know or understand. They wander in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. However, you will die like humans and will fall like any other ruler. Rise up, God, and judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you. So it's a really interesting psalm. So when I used to read it, I kind of read the least supernatural piece of this. So I used to think, well, maybe these are just humans, and they are God is just hammering them because they were maybe supposed to be judges. They were supposed to be maybe individuals who were supposed to rule well. And God says, hey, even though you are my representatives, you're all going to die. I'm going to judge you. That's okay. I think you could make that, right? It says, like, I've said you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. You could make a case for something like Psalm 2, where the king is seen as the Son of God. That's his title as he represents the Father, God on earth as the king. The more I read this, I think that there's just more there. So he stands in the divine assembly and he pronounces judgment among the gods. Now, this is where I think it's important to recognize. It appears that what this psalm is saying, right, is that there is this group that present themselves to God, and it seems that, what does it say? That they're supposed to judge, but they're not judging. They're not doing it right. God had set them there to do something over the influence of the world, but instead they're not. And so they're not providing justice and pushing back against wickedness. No, they're continuing wickedness, creating darkness. It says the foundations of the earth are shaken. That's in actually Psalm 11, and that's the idea that there's just utter chaos, that all of society, the societal fabric, is falling apart. He says, you're gods, all your sons of the Most High, but you'll die like humans. Now, here's what I like about this. Here's what I think he is saying, okay, is you angelic beings, right? Job 1 says that they come before him. You see that again at another time where they all present themselves. And I think what it's saying is this, is you guys all, you claim to be gods. You want to be gods. You want to be worshipped. But you're all going to die like humans. I think this is profound. I think that these are real spiritual beings that have been given dominion over areas in the spiritual realm. And what God is saying to them is, you no longer do your job. You're no longer helping. In fact, it seems that they have set themselves up. They have chosen to set themselves up to be seen as divine, and that God says, yeah, guess what, little gods? You're not really gods. I'm taking you out. You're done. So the question is, are there other places where we could say, yeah, that seems to be the case, that there maybe seems to be that the idea that there was kind of a hierarchy or a plan, a spiritual realm. There's thrones and these powers that are over areas. Well, yes, there is. Actually, more explicitly in Daniel chapter 10. So Daniel is praying, and then it says, after the angel comes to him, he says, do not be afraid, Daniel said to me, for the first day that you purpose to understand and humble yourself before God, your prayers were heard. And I've come because of your prayers. But the kingdom of Persia opposed me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me after I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now I've come to help you and understand what will happen to your people in the last days. The visions refers to those days. Then he goes on to say, right, as he finishes up here, he says this. He says, do you know why I've come to you? I must return at once to fight against the prince of Persia. When I leave, the prince of Greece will come. However, I will tell you what is recorded in the book of truth. No one has the courage to support me against those princes except Michael, your prince. So this is important. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to strengthen and protect him. Now I will tell you the truth. So there is this peculiar, very interesting exchange. Obviously, these princes that's the title for these angels. We know Michael's name already. We have this individual who comes and he announces things to him and he says, look, I was held up. There was this prince of Persia. So there's Michael, the prince, who's an angelic being, the chief of the princes. He's the leader, has a special place as over helping with Israel, it seems. And it says, but I was opposed by this prince of Persia, and I couldn't leave. He kept fighting me, and which is weird to think, right? And then he says, Michael comes to help me, and so I'm going to come back and help him. But after, guess what? The prince of Greece is coming. Now, what that passage seems to indicate is that there are angelic beings behind thrones, that there are angelic beings behind the rise of empires. Go back to that passage we just said, once again, in Revelation 13, right? So there's the dragon. He comes, and notice what it says here. After he's thrown down, he waits. The beast comes out of the sea, and the dragon gave the beast his power, his throne, and authority. And then everyone's amazed because he gave his authority to the beast. So Satan himself gives up, it seems, puts all his eggs into the basket of this beast coming through. So here we are. It seems that there are angelic beings that are over regions now. We have a region of Greece and Persia, and they're over this, and they have extreme power, so much so that the angels need to kind of band together to fight. So what? Well, I look, here's what I think. I think that those set of verses in Daniel 10 alone give us insight that there's something else going on behind the scenes with world governments. I think that you could probably say that there are princes, angelic powers behind every major country, every region. You know, you see most ancient peoples, their gods were regional. Let's see if I can find the passage in Kings. It's the people are trying to say, that your God is a God they're coming against fighting in the book of Kings. I think it's 2 Kings somewhere. And he said we can't fight him here because their God is a God of the hills and your God is a God, so there's this idea that we're going to have to get you in a certain region where our God can triumph. Yeah, you see it in 1 Kings chapter 20, not 2 Kings, but it says, the man of God approached and said to the king of Israel, this is what the Lord says, because the Arameans have said the Lord is a God of the mountains and not a God of the valleys, I will hand over all this land, this whole huge army to you, then you will know that I am the Lord. And so there's this people that are saying, that they believe, and you'll see it, that earlier on in 1 Kings, that there is this idea that the people are saying, gods are regional. We have them in this area. Their God is a mountain god. This one's a valley god. And so there's always kind of been this idea that the gods are tied to regions. And so I think that that is the case. I've heard of missionaries that say that they've definitely have seen this to be the case of influence and power of gods in regions, that there seems to be regional kind of deities and powers that are there. Once again, the question, though, is where do these guys come from? I think the answer, by the way, comes from a place that we see in Deuteronomy chapter 32. And here's where it comes out. Deuteronomy 32 says this: When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance and divided the human race, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the people of Israel. The Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his own inheritance. So let me show you here. This is what's interesting. If you click on this, I'm going to click on this and see if this pops up for you as you're reading. But it says when God divided the human race. So talking about post-Babel, most likely, because he scattered the nations at that time. Post-Babel, Tower of Babel. The Masoretic text, the Hebrew text that we see reflected is, we'll say, according to the numbers, the sons of Israel, which would be, 12, right? That's interesting. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, one Dead Sea Scroll says, according to the numbers of the sons of God, and the Septuagint readings, meaning the ones that are Greek translations of a Hebrew text in the BC period, so earlier, usually earlier than Dead Sea and the Masoretic text, sometimes reads the number of the angels of God. Seems to be saying, if you understand what this passage says, is that when God divided up the nations, what did he do? Is he set the boundaries, and it seems to be saying that he set them up by placing angelic beings over these regions wherever they settled. Now then, notice how interesting this is. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his own inheritance, which is fascinating, which he's saying he let the nations go all their own way, and he placed angels over them, but not with his people, not with Israel. It's completely different. They are his people. They're his inheritance. They belong to him. So here's what I contend to you, and I'm going to close this out now. Put this back up so you can see that. He divided the nations according to... I'd be interested to see what translation you have that would see this, but that's reflected in the footnotes. You'll see that in the appendix. But here's a question for you. Here's how I kind of tie it all together. This was part one then. I believe that the Bible is teaching that post-Babel, God allows the nations to go their own way. He places angels over that. Psalm 82. They are there to roam the land. They're able to provide justice. And what do? Is instead, Satan influences them to do what? To fall away. They no longer are doing what God has called them to do. These judges that are post-Babel, they begin to do what instead? Set themselves up. To set themselves up as gods. They say, we're gods, worship us instead. And so now all these nations, all these people begin to worship these regional deities, these angelic beings that believe themselves to be God. They're so arrogant and prideful, believe themselves to be God, and the people buy it. And the reason they do is because there's still power behind these angelic beings. And so this is how the world works. It's under this influence. And so when Psalm 82 says, you guys are going to die like men, God's saying it's over. It's done. When you think about the gospel, as it goes out in Matthew 28, right, all authority is given to him now. And there's nothing that the Christian can do. There's nothing that can stand in his way. It is all his. He owns it all. And so when the Christian is going into regions, these are sometimes very dark regions, and we are dealing with something much, much darker behind. I think this should just bring us to the idea is that there's much darker things going on than I imagine. But it should also make you realize that with Christ behind you, we are his possession. And despite the amount of darkness, we go back. Let's just go back and finish up with those words in Ephesians 6. Right? We'll go back to the passage that we see here, right? What does he see? He tells us that it is dark out there. He tells us that it is going to be scary, that there are cosmic powers and darkness and evil. And then he says, take up the full armor of God so you may be able to resist in the evil day. This is not just about temptations, but this is about the daily spiritual battle that will come to the Christian as we live our lives for him and try to be faithful believers, try to give the gospel, try to be missionaries for him. That's why we should be prayerful. We should be bold. We should be daily in the word. We should be taking all that we can to stand against. This is a real thing. shouldn't scare us to where we say, I can't do it, but we should cling to the Scriptures. We should be more prayerful, as we know that this world around us is a broken world, and it has dark influence because it's been corrupted since early on. All right, I hope this was helpful. We'll talk more about this. I'd like to talk more in the next segment about what do angels do, what about demons, maybe some other things. We'll go into another part, but I'm going to end this for now, just kind of talking about the structure in the world that exists behind the scenes. Let me know what you think, if you have any questions on this. Don't forget, like and subscribe too. Thanks, guys.